If you like Drytron, and well, you're clearly on YouTube, then you know Logan JYA, a man who has not only dedicated his channel to the deck, but basically his life too. Now I might not be as passionate about Drytron as he is, but I love the deck nonetheless. So much so that I took it to a regional in February and did decently okay with it, finishing in the top 16 with an X2 record. So given that this is currently the off season, I figured, you know what, why not try and make the deck work again and see if we can keep up with the big boys. I haven't looked at what Logan has cooked up just yet, so I figured I should try doing this a bit blindly at first and then consolidate our differences later. Why, you ask? Because I am starved for content. Moving on, let's take a look at my list. Okay, so looking at the list, there's a couple of things that I'd like to discuss. Firstly, I am running 41 cards as opposed to popular lists that seem to be on 44 or 45. I think by now a lot of you know that basically all of my decks happen to be 41. But that superstition aside, the reason for this is because I am not playing any auto win bricks like Secret Village or Vanity Ruler in the main. Normally these higher count lists try to minimize the risk of drawing on these bricks by playing more cards and more starters, to balance out the loss of consistency. However, playing more cards in the main will always decrease the consistency of your side deck, so you always need to keep this in mind. I'm sticking to 41 and I'm playing 13 names. I am playing 6 1-card starters, 7 if you count the 1 for 1. For non-engine I am on 13, if you count the Call by the Grave, which is not a lot. So to make up for the slack, I am basically playing the ones that either produce a half board or help break a full one. Lava Golem feels a little strange. It isn't great against Mitsurugi, but it does help out against Detonator, Malice, and Lunalight boards. Honestly, I think you can justify cutting it for Perulia, but I don't own that in paper, so I'm just making do with what I have. I'm only playing 2 Cyber Emergency, which feels a little lackluster, but at 41 you can afford to get away with this. Now in terms of consistency, I tested 100 hands, and 91 produced full combo. Of that 91, 36 was via a 1-card combo, 1-card starter, or 1 for 1. 55 by hands that opened multiple names, 21 of which saw Alpha and Zeta exactly. The bricks ended on Dragster Pass at best, which is just an auto loss in this format. So we know the deck is good in a vacuum, but how about in practice? Well, let's jump into replays to see how exactly. So that went better than I hoped. If you were paying attention, you might have noticed that I played against a balance of decks, both meta and rogue, and while Drytron was able to keep up with both. It kinda feels like the deck has enough push to stop rogue in its path, while also playing enough blowout cards and turn skips to have a fighting chance against the meta's top decks. Probably its greatest advantage is that most players still don't know how to play against the deck, which results in them hand trapping incorrectly. Generally speaking, you want to save your Veiler or Impom for Mu Beta, but most people drop it on U2, and that just makes the game easy. Beyond this, most decks are still not prepared for Dad, which is basically Appaloosa, but better. Also, Zeus is still surprisingly good. That aside, the deck faces a couple of challenges. Droll is still a problem, and even though I was able to play through it or at the very least end on a Fuko, which bought me a turn, it is still very frustrating and can end your turn. Speaking of frustrating turn skips, people are playing Bestials again, and man do they suck. I'm playing Beta specifically to recover from them, but even then that doesn't feel like it's enough. Lastly, I feel as though this deck struggles against Ryzeal. Detonator is a nightmare and can completely prevent you from playing if you don't draw Droplet exactly. When it comes down to it, the deck feels like it's running on fumes. But man, am I gonna huff until I can't huff no more.